This one's going to be half a review and half why you should just get It's a Wonderful World instead. Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and this is, well, a review-ish of It's a Wonderful Kingdom from La Botte de Jeu and the newest version of It's a Wonderful World. The Wonderful Kingdom is a two-player version that takes the core gameplay of It's a Wonderful World and then mixes it up with a few changes, primarily an I cut you choose mechanism instead of drafting, and then additionally the fact that it's two players, obviously, and then the fact that it comes with a whole bunch of modules to mix up gameplay in small, different ways. That's the general idea. If you're not familiar with the core gameplay concept of It's a Wonderful World, which will be applied to It's a Wonderful Kingdom 2, the same basic idea is in this game you're trying to build out your own production queue, trying to build out a bunch of cards that will give you points and or more production, so you can then use those to build out more cards, which will give you more points, eventually resulting across 4 rounds of play in you having, well, as many points as possible. What you're trying to do specifically is you're going to have these cards you're trying to build, and each card has a cost on the left side over here, the upper left hand corner. Each card has a cost which you'll have to go ahead and generate the resources for them, and then as you generate resources you'll put them on the card, and when you've completely covered up a card, that card is constructed, and then it enters your own production queue in the game. From there it'll give you either resources or perhaps giving you points depending on the card, sometimes giving you both. That's the general idea. Build cards, get points, get more resource production, all of that. Now, specifically, in It's a Wonderful Kingdom, the way this plays out is every single round you're going to have 8 cards in your hand. You're going to start the game with 7 cards, and this is the standard base idea of the game. The modules will mix things up. But you'll have 7 cards in your hand, plus 1 calamity as well. So you're going to have a calamity over here, something bad that the players do not want. Generally just point reduction as far as calamities. There's other modules that mix up that concept. And you're going to have these cards. You're also going to add 2 cards down to the table. So you have 2 starting piles as far as how the drafting is going to go. The I cut you choose as opposed to drafting. And then a player will go ahead and choose and put down cards in such a way that ideally gives their opponent a choice. So for example, maybe I go ahead and I put one of these treasures over here that'll give you 2 soldiers into this pile over here, and then maybe I go ahead and lock in this over here, and that gives you a choice. The other player will now choose which pile they want. That's what they're going to do. They're going to go ahead and take a pile, and then the other player makes the same choice, putting their own 2 cards somewhere. Maybe they particularly want this card, and so they stack this card over here, and now it's my turn, and I go ahead and choose a pile. Rinse and repeat as we gather cards from this central table in order to into our own piles. It's I cut, you choose. We put down cards, we give them the choice, the other player makes the choice. Now what mixes this concept up a bit is the fact that you have trap tokens, and those calamities that I told you were, well, not great. -4 points each one. That's not something you actually want. And so what happens in the game is you're going to have a bit of a mechanism which you can place a card face down if you flip over your trap tokens. So for example, I can go ahead, as I'm making the piles over here, I can go ahead and place this card like so, and then grab a token and expend my trap token in order to place this card face down. Which leads to the real question, which is now you have to ask yourself, did I just place down my calamity, that's why it's face down, to hide it from you? Or is it not my calamity and I'm bluffing? The trap tokens, 2 of which per round, give you an element of bluffing in the game, in which you're trying to outplay your opponent to help them, well, not to help them, to hope that they don't figure out what it is you're trying to do, what it is you're trying to hide, whether you really want that card that goes along with the face down card, or whether you really don't and you're just trying to mess with people through playing of these cards in a way that obfuscates the choices on the table. When you're done with this back and forth, when you go through the full back and forth, giving out all the cards, selecting them, doing the whole trap tokens face down, eventually you'll have a pool of cards in front of you. For better or for worse. Maybe we'll just go ahead and move this aside over here. Maybe this is the pile of cards we have in front of us. Just a variety of cards that we're going to use for our production engines. I'm going to put this off to the side just so we have more room here. But you have your cards on the table in front of you, and you're going to use them in a variety of different ways. These cards over here are treasure cards. What they're going to do is they're going to just give us things off the bat. We'll take 2 soldiers, and we'll take 2 yellows, which we'll use to go ahead and start the process of covering up this card over here. Because cards in front of you can start being produced, can start being worked on and built. This calamity, not so much. This will just be negative points. We'll slide that over here. And these cards are left over here as far as giving us different ways to build out more of a production queue. Our starting cards come with their own little production queue on them. This will be generating 2 grays and 2 purples each round, which is going to be helpful for the cards we have. We need purples, we need grays, and we're trying to figure out what else we need and how else we're going to manage it. We don't have any blue production, unfortunately, but maybe we can get this produced. If we go ahead and expend this yellow over here, we're going to give up this card force recycling bonus to get a yellow on here, which means that when we go ahead and produce grays, we're going to produce grays here, building this, which will then give us the blue that we'll need to build that. So you create a bit of a cycle of production. So I go ahead and expend this card, and again, you don't have to do this right away. You can do this when you want, but you can expend cards for the recycling bonus at the top. Then from there, we're going to go to the production cycle. Once you're done with all that, once you've arranged your production queue, once you've built everything out, once you've given up cards for the recycling bonus, you now enter the actual production cycle where you go one at a time through the resource types, the 4 resource types, producing each one. So for example, right now we're going to produce 2 gray and 2 purple. I'll put the 2 gray over here, I'll put the 2 purple over here, and anything that does not go on a card has to go on your own center home card, where it can be traded in at a 5-to-1 ratio, giving you specific these little red ones over here, which are necessary for some cards and otherwise wild. But that's not an efficient trade, and it's just what you can do if you don't have any other options. After that, we'll go ahead and, because this card is built, we'll take off the resources, we'll dump these over here, and we'll slot this card up here, which means as we move to blue later in the round, we will actually produce blue. Even though there's only 4 rounds of play, each round is broken into 4 different production cycles of each of the 4 types, and so you have the opportunity to build within a round in order to build more later in that same round. From there, we go to purple. I'm generating purple over here. I'm going to generate these well, I did that out of order. I should have generated the gray, then the purple. I did them at the same time. Then from there, we generate yellow. I'm not generating any yellow. From there, we generate blue. I'm generating 1 blue, which I'll put over here. Now, one thing we did not talk about is the fact that whoever generates the most of each type potentially earns the benefit of getting a soldier. Soldiers will have a variety of reasons that they're useful. Some of the modules use them and incorporate them in different ways. Other times, they're needed for certain cards, but the way you get a soldier is in addition to the fact that some cards will give you bonuses when you build them. I'll show you that in a second. Other times, whenever you produce the most of something, you start by training a soldier. So you grab a soldier and put it into your particular depot, and the next time you produce the most, you train that soldier. So it takes 2 actions, 2 times that you produce the most in order to gather that soldier into your reserve. Going back to what I mentioned about those bonuses, these 2 cards over here both show small little bonuses on them. This one gives us a soldier as a one-time bonus when we build it. This one gives us one of those red cubes as a one-time bonus when we build it. And that's basically the game. You're going to go through that 4 rounds of play, going through the cycles. At the end of the game, you'll have a bit of a multiplier or different point scoring in effect. You'll have this 1 point over here. This one will give you 2 points per purple. And you'll have all these cards that give you different points that ideally score off one another. This is a game where the first round of play easily feels like you will get nothing done. The second round of play feels like you're still going to get barely anything done, but by the time the game is over, you're scoring 70 to 80 points, or maybe 60 to 80 points, depending how well you do, as you figure out how to make everything work together to daisy chain off one another. You have a sequence of cards that are giving you multiple points for purples, and that means you're getting 6 points for every purple card you have. Meanwhile, you're grabbing a purple that also gives you 3 points for every yellow you have, so you're building a system of yellow and purple with a few adjacent cards thrown in that help build out the cycle. You have a lot of points going on in this game, and that's before we get to the modules. The modules all give you a way to mix up the gameplay experience. The base game comes with a few modules. If you have the Kickstarter version of the game, as I do over here, then you'll have a few more modules as well. So we have both base game, Kickstarter version. You'll have more modules there. And these all give you a different way to mix up the experience. Small rules adjustments, different cards that come in, monsters and traps that are placed for proxies, a bunch of characters you can have. They all give you small adjustments to the gameplay that give you the core gameplay, but with a rule adjustment or 2 that changes it up in some way, shape, and form, giving you a slightly different puzzle, a slight different variation to the experience, and different ways to score points, and different things to be mindful of in the game. And that's basically It's a Wonderful Kingdom. If you know It's a Wonderful World, this will mostly be stuff you already know and understand. This is basically It's a Wonderful World for 2 players with rules adjustments, and that will bring us directly to the comparative review. This is not going to be my usual structure. If you watch my reviews in general, this is not following that format in the slightest. Rather, I'm going to be focusing very much on a comparison to It's a Wonderful World because it's basically the same game, but focusing on what is better, neutral, and worse, at least for myself, because it will very much be an opinion, because that's how reviews work. Starting off with what's better. To start off with what's better is the module variability. This game does give you different ways to engage with the game in a way that It's a Wonderful World did not quite as much. It gives you little adjustments to the rules, little modules that give you a way or tweak or adjustment into the way you can play the game. Now, to its downside, this is not really a game where you mix and match the modules. This is a game where you pick a module you like, which means there's always some degree of mixing cards in. There's always some degree of rules changes. There are cons that come along with the module variability, but it does give you that variability if you want it. Or you can just find the module that you like the best and always play the game that way. That part's up to you. Additionally, speaking for myself, and this is very much a personal opinion, all these things are, it has a better art and theme to the game. I drastically prefer the Kingdom medieval theme of It's a Wonderful World, of It's a Wonderful Kingdom, over It's a Wonderful World. I prefer the art style. It's the same artist, but I just love the art on the cards in this game compared to It's a Wonderful World. I find that the style of art more drastically fits this game, and I like it a lot, much better visually speaking. And that's kind of where the good stuff ends. As far as what's neutral, the bluffing mechanism of the game to me is neutral. Some people will like it, some people will hate it. To me, it neither adds nor takes away. I don't mind bluffing in general. I feel it's a drop out of place in this game. It almost changes the whole I cut you choose game. It almost changes the entire game into, if one player is better at bluffing than the other, you might win because you're better at bluffing, which feels a bit out of place in a tableau engine building game. But if that works for you, it works for you. To me, I would say the players in my group were all competently well matched at bluffing, so it doesn't feel like there's a drastic mismatch there. It has an element to the game that neither improves it nor makes it worse for me. That idea of playing down a trap token as you place cards face down, as you try to outthink your opponent, as you look for what they're going for, you look for what you're going for, and try to figure out what to do at the right time. I don't mind it. If you took it away from the game, I wouldn't mind at all. The fact that it's in the game, don't mind at all. It's completely neutral to me. It is a gameplay mechanism that for you might feel out of place, or for you might love it. For me, I'm kind of neutral on it here. As far as what's worse, we have a few things. First of all, offhand, the player count flexibility makes this a harder game to recommend just from that alone, which would be fine if the game improved in any significant way that makes it a easier recommendation. But the fact that this is a game that you can only play with 2 players, it has a solo mode, to be very clear. I have not played the solo mode, but the fact that this is a 1 to 2 player game, contrasted with a 1 to, I think, 5 player game, if I'm not mistaken, either 4 or 5 for It's a Wonderful World. Maybe the expansion made it 5, I don't remember exactly, but this inherently chops down the player count, which gives it less flexibility. So that's just an inherent factual worse aspect to the game. Secondly, the drafting versus I cut you choose. I always prefer drafting over its I cut you choose. It's not entirely true. I guess there are some games that do I cut you choose really well. I generally prefer drafting as a mechanic, and the removal of drafting from It's a Wonderful Kingdom, while not terrible, because I never found the drafting in It's a Wonderful World, I always enjoy drafting, I always do, but the game, the way the cards were structured, I never found it as intense as some drafting games. It was rare that I had that absolute exact card that I needed. The whole game was a little bit more abstracted, and so I don't find the removal of drafting to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe you ruined the game for me. But I still do prefer it over the I cut you choose mechanism, and so for me that's just a step backwards as far as the gameplay. And then I'd say additionally is I just find the entire modular system to be not worth the payoff. It is inherently true that the modules add more variability. It's inherently true that they add more gameplay options, but I find that the whole process of reading the rules for a new module, I didn't find the modules I played, and I have not played with them all, but I did not find the modules I played to be worth the fact that there's an additional rule set that I have to learn and teach to another person, and it didn't feel like the payoff was there. Did they add to the game? Yes, they did. Relevant to the degree of extra rules and the fact that I have to mix in or mix out or shuffle cards in and out of the game and arrange the sorting, did I feel it added to that extent? Personally speaking, I did not. As far as what I can't speak to at all, solo mode. I've heard good things about the solo mode in It's a Wonderful Kingdom. I haven't played the solo mode in either of these 2 games, so I'm not commenting on that. But if you're looking at this game as a solo experience, I would recommend checking out reviews, because I think that's where I've seen the most positive opinions of It's a Wonderful Kingdom. As far as final thoughts on It's a Wonderful Kingdom, I got this game, I got It's a Wonderful Kingdom hoping it would be a better experience of It's a Wonderful World for me. I always enjoyed It's a Wonderful World. I think It's a Wonderful World is a good game, and I enjoy it, but it's not one that I kept in comparison with other games. I find other games I prefer more, and while I like the system in general, and while I think Corruption and Ascension added even more to that system, for me, it wasn't a keeper. And I got It's a Wonderful Kingdom partially because the art style pulled me in even more, partially because the gameplay changes felt like it had promise and potential, although perhaps the removal of drafting to something else should have been my first flag, because generally that's a step back for me. And I would say overall, while I do enjoy It's a Wonderful Kingdom, and while I think it is a fun experience, and while I would not turn down a game of it, I can't personally find a reason to recommend this over It's a Wonderful World. Score-wise, both of these are 3.5s for me. Score-wise, they're close enough. The changes are not significant enough that I walked into this experience thinking, wow, I would just rather play It's a Wonderful World. But I did think I would rather play It's a Wonderful World. I don't see a system or situation in which I would prefer or recommend this to It's a Wonderful World past the art style, I guess, which is just not enough of a reason for me. The art and theme is not enough of a reason for me to recommend this one over It's a Wonderful World. I think it is a fine game. I just don't know who it's created for. It's a Wonderful World plays well with 2. It does. It plays totally fine with 2. This is meant for 2, but I'm not entirely clear on the target audience for this game. It feels like it takes a very simple, accessible game, adds complexity without the payoff of the complexity, removes drafting and replaces it with I cut you choose, which didn't feel amazing in this game. It felt totally okay. It adds bluffing, which may or may not be a fit for you, but feels a bit like a mismatch within the game. Overall, it's totally fine, but I would just recommend you get It's a Wonderful World instead. And that's basically it. That's the review of It's a Wonderful Kingdom. A fine game, but I think it already has a better game in existence, its older brother. As far as game recommendations, obviously It's a Wonderful World is going to be the first game I recommend because I think it's a better game. And then secondly, if you are looking for an I Cut You Choose game, one that actually feels like it really does well and plays amazingly, and one of my favorite games, then Hanamakoji. Hanamakoji has an amazing I Cut You Choose mechanic that I thoroughly enjoy, and it doesn't feel out of place there. It feels like it works, and the whole game is built off it and works well around it, as opposed to It's a Wonderful Kingdom, where it just feels like they proxied in new mechanics and new themes, and specifically called it 2 players in order to sell another game, which worked. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.